Every year, 5 billion pizzas are sold across the globe. From the neon-lit streets of Seoul to the industrial hubs of Chicago, it has become the world's most pervasive comfort food. Yet for most of its existence, this recipe was physically confined to a single coastal Italian city. It didn't exist in the cookbooks of Rome or the kitchens of Venice. It was a strictly Neapolitan phenomenon. To the Italian elite of the time, this flatbread was a sign of urban decay. It was a street ration, sold from open-air stalls and consumed by a class of people with no other options. How this localized survival food broke out of the Naples slums to dictate global taste is a journey driven by necessity and mass displacement. In the 1800s, Naples was one of the most densely populated cities in Europe. Laborers and their families were packed into overcrowded tenements, living in conditions defined by a total lack of space and resources. For the city's porters and dock workers, the formal meal was a luxury they could not afford in money or time. They lived in a state of constant motion, needing calories that were portable, immediate, and virtually free. Neapolitan bakers met this demand with a simple dough, topped with lard and garlic, and seared in coal-fired ovens. It was high-density fuel designed to be eaten with one hand while standing in a crowded alleyway. Pizza was the biological and economic result of the Neapolitan slum, a high-calorie solution for a workforce pushed to the limit of survival. The recipe began to change as the tomato arrived from the Americas. Viewed with suspicion by botanists, the fruit eventually found its way into southern Italy. Bakers began crushing these fruits over dough, adding moisture and complexity without increasing the cost. In 1889, the dish moved from the street toward the palace. Queen Margherita of Savoy visited Naples and, seeking to connect with her southern subjects, requested a taste of the city's local specialty. A local baker prepared a specific variation using red tomatoes, white mozzarella, and green basil. By mimicking the colors of the newly unified Italian flag, he transformed a peasant ration into a patriotic symbol. Word of the Queen's approval began to filter through the city's social circles. While it remained a staple for the poor, the royal visit provided the first bridge between the slums and the upper classes. This alignment with the Italian identity allowed the dish to begin its slow climb up the social hierarchy, transitioning from a localized necessity to a recognized national asset. The globalization of pizza was ultimately driven by a massive demographic shift. At the turn of the 20th century, millions of Italians began leaving their homes, boarding transatlantic liners in search of economic stability. These immigrants carried very little physical wealth. They were laborers and craftsmen who brought their cultural memory and recipes as their only mobile assets. In American industrial centers like New York and Chicago, these new arrivals faced the same economic pressures they had left behind in Naples. They needed a way to feed their communities cheaply and quickly. Immigrant bakers opened small shops in tenement basements, using coal-fired ovens to serve the workers in their own neighborhoods. These shops became the social anchors of the Italian enclaves. In the American environment, the recipe adapted. Access to more plentiful ingredients led to larger crusts and heavier toppings of meat and cheese, creating a denser version of the Neapolitan original. The accessibility of these shops eventually drew in the wider American public. By the mid-20th century, the pizza shop had moved from the edge of the immigrant neighborhood into the center of mainstream commercial life. Mass migration transformed a static local tradition into a highly mobile export, capable of taking root in any city with a working class. By the 1950s, the Americanized version of pizza began to radiate outward. It was no longer just an Italian or American dish. It was becoming a global commercial standard. The architecture of the recipe is its greatest strength. This diagram shows the three-part system: the base, the sauce, and the topping. This modularity allows any culture to swap out ingredients without losing the underlying form of the dish. In Tokyo, bakers add corn and seafood. In Brazil, they use green peas and hearts of palm. Because the structure is so simple, the dish functions as a host for local preferences in every country it enters. A dish that began as a lard-topped bread for the Neapolitan poor now anchors a global industry worth over $140 billion. Pizza succeeded not through a strict adherence to one recipe, but by acting as a blank template that every culture on Earth could use to project its own identity. Today, when we share a pizza, We are participating in a tradition born from the survival instincts of people who had almost nothing. The very same caloric density that once kept a 19th century dockworker alive now sustains a multi-billion-dollar global culture. It is the ultimate monument to the resilience of the working class, a survival dish that became a global legend. One city, one dish, one story shared by the world.